Hello, BirthFit community. It is Lindsay Matthews Cantu, your BirthFit founder and CEO. And today we have a very special guest, special friend of mine, and his name is Dr. Stanton Home. He is the brains, the heart, the founder of Future Generations in San Diego, which is a chiropractic and wellness office. And Dr. Stanton grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles and claims to be a global Southern Californian. His parents raised him with a balance of American and Asian culture, which included a conservative approach to health and healing. Even today, he includes a small bottle of white flower oil in his medicine cabinet, the same oil his grandmother used to put on his stomach as a child when he was not feeling well. 2 weeks after high school graduation, Stan left home for basic training at the United States Military Academy of West Point, where he majored in life science and minored in mechanical engineering. During his junior year, he interned at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, after which he decided not to go to medical school. Although an incredible experience, he wanted a future in healthcare that was focused on building relationships and healing people in more sustainable ways, something he values deeply. In 2003, his brother Steve, also a chiropractor in Encinitas, California, sent him 3 books while he was deployed in Iraq. The first was The Web That Has No Weaver by Dr. Ted Kapchuk, the second, Total Health Program by Dr. Joe Mercola, and last, Applied Kinesiology by Robert Frost. These books changed his life because what he had known as possible as a result of reading books on Tibetan Buddhism and quantum physics was now available in tangible healing practices. So, this is Dr. Stan. He has a world of experience, and I won't continue to read his bio because we'll be here forever. But he's a dear friend of mine, as I met him in chiropractic school. I met him in chiropractic school in Los Angeles, and we have since stayed in touch. He graduated in 2010 cum laude and has also done check exercise coach, holistic healing trainings, and the list goes on. Dr. Stan is a father, he is a husband, and he is a leader in this health freedom movement. So let me get him on here.
Boom, boom, boom. What?
And welcome.
My volume. Where's
Can you
my
hear
volume?
me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Great. I can hear you.
What's up, Lindsay?
Life. What's up with you? You're about
About the
to be the
same.
father of 2?
Yeah. It's
Oh,
a little bit it's a little crazy, man. It's a little crazy.
yeah, I hear you. It's so good to see your face and hear your voice.
It's been a long time.
I know. I
You're
feel
married.
like I am married now, which is wild.
Somebody was like, I'm so excited to hear you and Matthews.
Can
Trying to get
too.
your last name.
I know. I don't know if I ever will truly get rid of Matthews because, as how I was 38, so I just turned 39. As a
Oh my
38-year-old
goodness.
woman that gets married, you're like, you have this name that has stuck with you forever,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he would really like it if if I officially finished all the
If you can
paperwork.
shift it over, oh man.
Yeah. Well, I'm stoked to have you. I got lots of questions from our community.
Oh, no way.
And
Right.
yeah, yes way. And yeah, just to hear what's going on in your life. So I gave a little bit of your intro, but I didn't read the entire bio that you have on Future Generations.
No
But
worries.
it's so long. It's awesome. Um, Share with the audience who you are and what you do and how you show up in this world.
Man.
Yeah, if you could sum it up.
Constantly evolving. Hey guys, my name is Dr. Stanton Hum. I'm a prenatal and pediatric chiropractor in San Diego, California. I have been a devout BirthFit follower from its origins and
For sure.
a huge fan of Lindsay Matthews, Lindsay Cantu for many, many years. I mean, since school. And at the end of the day. I've been in practice 11 years, and that's kind of humbling to say. And, obviously the last two, amplifying how I show up in the world because, I got this kiddo behind me. Can my wife do any second, any day? And, from a birth perspective, oh man, like to bear witness to life essentially being brought onto the planet to, for 11 years, and many of those years being mentored by you, Lindsay, as far as like just safeguarding that process through
Mm.
informed consent, through education, through empowerment, through seeing, hearing, valuing birthing mothers, along with, sometimes very, how do you say this? Green fathers to be.
Yeah.
And at the same time, watching those miraculous things happen. When I talk to patients today, many of them have an idea of where I come from at this stage, but what they don't know is why I'm so crazy. They don't know
Yeah.
why, like the true why, as far as why I'm so crazy. And when you
I would say
understand,
crazy,
well,
passionate.
crazy compared to what is acceptable in the world today,
Oh.
right? Crazy compared to what is the narrative today.
Mm.
Crazy compared to even what maybe some holistic practitioners and natural providers are, seeing as normal, or how they're
Yeah.
operating today. And it's because when you understand normal, and you understand like how this whole process of preconception, conception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, babies, kids, teens, that cycle of life, when you understand what normal actually is, then it really, really, really digs you into what we're actually fighting for. Like for my kid,
Oh.
like, oh my goodness, man, literally it's a fight every day for her, for the one that's coming, for
Mm.
their generation and all our friends, because I believe what's at stake is far greater than what we are perceiving at this moment. So,
That's awesome because one of my first questions was why? Why are you so vocal? Why do you speak out? Yeah, and it has to do with the children.
yeah, yeah. I
Dang.
mean, it has to do with the children. It has to do, with the babies, because we are on the cusp of the FDA authorizing this whole shot deal
Yeah.
with 9 months olds, and we know that some parents are just so they're just bought in and
Mhm.
trusting of their providers, of the system, and we know that this untested product, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are going to be given to these 9 months olds, right? Like
Mhm,
we have
mhm.
had patients who have left our practice because they don't
Yeah.
necessarily believe exactly what we believe, and they were the first ones in line when they authorized it for 5-year-olds,
Mm.
and then you start to see like the same comments of, wow, they stopped speaking, or wow, we have these significant delays, or wow, we have all these things that are happening. And for us, I go back maybe 5 years ago in my practice where we weren't seeing a lot of kids with neurodevelopmental and neurobehavioral disorders. And not to say that we didn't want to, and not to say we didn't have the skill set, not to say that it wasn't a need in society. It was to say that we were so focused on prevention. We were so
Mhm,
focused on
mhm.
wellness. And for us, if the 54% of kids that are currently diagnosed with chronic illness and comorbidities, catchphrase in the last 2 years, 1 in 2, like 1 in 2, greater than 1 in 2 kids have these challenges. Why not? Why not our practice?
Mhm,
Why not our
mhm.
community? Why
Yeah,
is it that we don't have the 1 in 6 with neurodevelopmental disorders? Why is it that we don't have the kids that have, the 1 in 4 kids that need special needs in the United
yeah.
States? Why, like, are our kids special? Are they ahead, or are they just
Normal?
normal? And so at the end of the day, like, that's where my like roots come from, is recognizing normal physiology, normal physiological aspects of that entire cycle of life, and fighting from that place, because it can't
Mm.
just be my kid. It can't just be the kids that come to our practice. It can't just be the kids that literally are raised through our practice. It has to be every kid deserves that
Totally,
opportunity, and I
totally.
believe BirthFit to be one of the like I said, like one of the beacons from the very beginning, like being very, very, very conscious about this process, and so
Mm.
I couldn't be happier to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that and recognizing that. It's really sweet, and I'm honored to have you here. I've been in awe of you the last 2 years for being so courageous. Can I say 2 years? We're basically at 2 years of
Yeah,
this
yeah. It's
COVID
basically 2
mania.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Stepping up, stepping out, being courageous, and if you could go back in time and like moments before the pandemic started. And you
Yeah.
can call it whatever you want, pandemic, scamdemic, plandemic, I don't
Oh,
shenanigans,
wow.
like
We can say all that? Lindsay, come on.
yes. But, how would you describe your life and practice before, March 2020?
My life and practice before March 2020 was so it was already so awesome, right? And that's what we were seeing is I said 5 years ago or so before we started to really see children who have been afflicted by these chronic neurological conditions,
Mm,
and then some of my buddies, some of our, friends were elbowing me saying, "You really should, um, just be that practice, be that
mm,
community beacon for these kids because one, I had the training to, I know a ton about it. Three, I love it. Like I really
yeah,
do love seeing kids that have these challenges because to be frank, I was one of them. Like a lot of sensory stuff, a lot of like I think I had now that they have all these crazy diagnoses now,
yeah,
selective mutism, like when I was
mhm,
like all the way till I was maybe 5 or 6, uh, varying forms of dyslexia and learning challenges, how you get through West Point with learning challenges.
yeah.
I don't know. I just became this like kind of master test taker, which is probably how I passed boards because I didn't study in school. But and so we started to see like my mindset was like if our kids in our practice are normal mostly, right? I think it's easier to prevent an illness
Mm,
than it is to reverse one. So, like, you step up to the plate
mhm,
and see if you
mhm,
can what you're doing for kids that you're preventing these challenges in, if it actually works the same way in terms of healing them. And we started to see that it just does. It just takes
mhm,
longer, and you have to really identify, like, how long chronic challenges have been there, how neuroplastically they are, literally memorizing these patterns of chronicity in the nervous system, and then you start to see kids say words for the first time and talk to their twin brother for the first time, or, literally like chronic gut issues go away, chronic atopic eczema, like bandages till they're like 3 or 4 years old because they don't
yeah,
want to like have kids, their kids, their parents are putting them on so that they don't scratch themselves
yeah,
continuously. Watching them change like from a onesie with those mitts that you have in newborns, right? Because you don't want babies to scratch their face. Like watching a kid have his hair done for the first time and wearing skinny jeans, right? Like a toddler in
mm,
skinny jeans because he's been in these onesies his whole life, right? And so for us, we were seeing these chronic issues reverse on the regular, and that makes life really good, right? It makes life
mhm,
really good because in the conventional healthcare system, I've been saying this for months now throughout this whole process, essentially saying like what we don't recognize now that the CDC and now that the Surgeon General, they're saying, oh, this mental health crisis because of the last 2 years, there's a mental health crisis. It's like, no, dude, there was a crisis that has been going on for decades long ago. You guys
mm,
had no answers for them besides sending them through the rigmarole. And I'm not saying anything about the speech, OT, PT, behavioral ABA cycle
yeah,
that they send these kids through. But I am saying that they have very little solutions for the root cause, right? Or the
totally,
many root causes. And so
yeah,
when you start to see these kids heal, that makes for an amazing practice, right? Because parents are
Mhm.
just saying like, "Wow, I wish I found you sooner. Wow, I didn't know that chiropractic could do this. Wow, I didn't know that
Absolutely.
chiropractic helped the brain. I didn't know that chiropractic helped the immune system." I don't know if we can say that though. Can we say chiropractic and immune system? I'm just
Yeah.
joking. But so
Say whatever.
practice was awesome. I've done 11 years of uh, shot workshops in my practice, so I've been used to the conversation of informed consent and the whole issue of injectables and safety or the lack thereof of the research behind them. And so I was well versed in this process, in this conversation. And then at the end of the day, when the 2 years ago, when the whole COVID scandemic came, man, we were just ready, and
Mm,
we realized that all the training that we had already was essentially an obligation. It was like an obligation and a duty to step up because we knew and we saw it, right?
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That was a good answer. I loved it. I loved it. Um, talk to me a little bit. Well, let me keep going
Yeah,
before I
no.
go off on tangents. So I go off on tangents very easily. Um, so would you say, and I hate to say the word battle, but it is kind of a
Mhm.
battle. It's a war. Um, what it's it's a battle.
Yeah.
Would you say the battle is over medical freedom, body sovereignty, or what would you say the battle is?
That's a great question, Lindsay, and you have no idea. You have no idea how prepared I am for this. Um,
Yes.
so health freedom, right? Like I've been saying for a long time that health freedom is it is that bodily autonomy, the
Mm,
inalienable rights, the personal sovereignties that we're seeing literally attempted to be stripped away from essentially this entire the whole human population at this point, right? Where we are seeing it vastly unchanging is with our kids. We're seeing it unchanging with our kids, meaning uh, conventional obstetrics, hospital births, like you have to think about like which hospital that you would want to birth in, not just because of the statistics before, which still matter, all the
mhm.
interventions, episiotomies, c-section rates, your own providers, all those things are still vastly important. But now you have to think about, will they let your partner in, will they let
Yeah.
your doula, and if you were planning a home birth and transferring or something like that, heaven forbid, will they let your midwife accompany you? Will they make you wear a mask? Will they make you test before um, actually being like one of our families came into our practice? They're like, I couldn't see my baby because
Mm,
I tested positive and therefore they kept the baby away from me. It's like, holy, like we have to write that down now. Like we have to
yeah,
literally say, I deny this, I deny testing, and I deny all these things because of all these different restrictions, right?
absolutely.
And then we see it in schools where somehow, right? You're not in LA anymore, but you were, right? But
Thank God.
LA and California, like they're not only masking kids indoors, in some counties outdoors at school, but they're forcing N95s on kids, right? And they literally have never, ever, 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 ever let up on these kids. Why? Depends on who you ask. But from my
Mm,
viewpoint, it's indoctrination.
mhm.
They want to normalize. Like my kid doesn't know a world. She's 2.5. She doesn't know a world without masks.
Yeah.
She's getting to a point where she's like, huh, like I see they wear masks. And she said this. She'll say this person mask, this person
Mm,
no mask. And she sees the difference. And then it's our job as parents to really build the bridge of maybe kindly, respectfully, but very black and white, why we choose what we choose. Try not
mhm.
to, in my opinion, our perspective, our family values, not alienate, marginalize other people for their choice. But sometimes I slip up,
I
and
mean,
other
we're
words come out of my
human.
mouth,
Yeah.
and 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 so that's one end, right? That's one end of health freedom. When you recognize that you are a free human, that no one, no thing, no document, no politician, no constitution, no news station, no social media company, no pharma company, no doctor actually tells you or gives you that freedom, then you are, in my view, and I think you might share this view with me, Lindsay, just knowing you and where you guys come from in BirthFit. It's what do you do with that freedom?
Mhm.
And I've said that freedom is that side, that inalienable rights, the personal sovereignties, the bodily autonomy, fighting to the death for that, because I've had
Mhm.
friends die for that, right? And
Absolutely.
people literally every day, people every day put on the uniform because they're defending your freedom, right? But when you have that freedom, I've been saying that it's about normalizing vibrant health for life, but all future generations, right?
Mm.
Normalizing that every single one of us have within us by matter of existence, by being alive today, we not only have the ability to heal the old shit that we've had, right? Mental, spiritual, emotional,
For sure.
physical, but we also say you don't have anything, say you have no chronic illnesses, say you have no
Mhm.
diagnoses, you don't take any drugs, then you are obligated, in my view, to get into the very best health and expression of your humanity for several reasons. One,
Mm.
because when you procreate, you then gift that to your
Mhm.
kiddo and their future generations. But maybe on the opposite, also, it's like you don't get caught with your pants down again, right? Like like 2 years ago, it was like, whoa, like this whole wave of like fear and anxiety and tsunami
Oh,
wave. I just left the beach with this family that has been essentially following us, like our whole journey, future generations. And they're like, you would be surprised at how our evolution over the last 2 years. And the guy just literally came up to me today. He's like, so chicken pox deal. Like, just asking questions about, all the things now. And he was like, dude, something that I noticed over the last 2 years is as I started to peel back the curtain of everything that's been going on, I've been less and less afraid. And I was like,
mm.
yeah, yeah, because if you know with incredible certainty and humility that you have this ridiculously, wildly vibrant, always working, hyper intelligent, infinitely intelligent healing capacity inside your body just by matter of being alive, then maybe the society would fear less, but maybe we would actually just express our fullest potential on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis. And so that
Mhm.
that to me is like essentially my answer to that. I feel like we've been fighting this side, right? This side of inalienable rights. And you live in Texas. Somehow you just have more freedom in Texas than we do in California. But on the opposite end, it's like, what do you do with that? Right. And
Yeah.
I've been talking to a lot of my friends in Florida and Texas and Idaho and all these in South Dakota and all these places with favorable politicians, right? And I'm like, are you being proactive? Are you
Mhm.
meeting your politicians? Are you building relationships? Are you writing and potentially envisioning, drafting legislation that preserves individual rights, that
Absolutely.
preserves our ability to choose medical products, that maybe safeguards the whole population from the influx of industry, no liability criminal companies type industry, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I love that question because health freedom has been one side. And I think many of us understand there's this whole other side that if we did that, not only would we prevent the fallout of what happened over the last 2 years, but oh, by the way, you'd literally understand what it's like to be a normal, vibrant human, right?
Yeah, totally. I love that. I think, the word responsibility comes to
Yeah.
mind, and I think responsibility is a big weight for people to bear, and
Mm.
especially over the last 2 years, I think, there's a doctor, a chiro that, I'm sure we both follow, Dr. Raymond Nichols,
Yeah.
and I think he was the one that first made a meme that was like, "Your health is your responsibility." And I think this was, like, at the beginning of, all of the shit going crazy, and people took offense to that, like, they were
They
like,
did.
"It's so offensive," or, and one of the biggest arguments for vaccination, shots, things like that is like, "If you don't get yours, then you're jeopardizing my health." It's like, that no, that could not be further from the truth, and I think the responsibility pill is a huge pill for people to swallow, and yeah, I think, that's kind of for me, on my personal healing journey, it was the pill I needed to swallow basically to pick
Mhm.
myself up from the bottom, And I don't know if anything comes to mind when I say responsibility, but that was what was coming to mind when you were talking.
No, I mean, I think it goes all the way back to many of our mentors, right?
Mhm.
It's healthy by choice, not by chance, right?
Yeah.
And there is a lot of money, right,
Mm,
in what we chiropractors would say outside in philosophy, right? Outside in healing, outside in curing, right? And it's crazy because if you don't know that you have a healing potential inside you, right?
yeah.
How, right? Your listeners probably do because many of them are probably mothers, right?
Mhm.
Or conscious fathers who have witnessed, right? Like every day, something new with my
Mhm.
wife, this human gestational process that nobody has. Like there's no opting out, right? Of being born, but it's 2 half cells to 26 billion cells, and I've interviewed, which you've probably interviewed way more than me, hundreds, if not thousands of moms at this stage, and not one has consciously grown a liver, or like today, fingers, right? Fingers
Yeah.
today, hair, let's schedule that in for next week. Like you don't it's a process that
Mhm.
happens innately and
Oh, for
automatically
sure.
and involuntarily, and there's no pause and there's no rewind and there's no fast forward. Well, conventional obstetrics fast forwards things, right? Sometimes stops things. But if you don't know that you have that healing potential, or worse, they convince you that
Mhm.
you're genetically made to destroy yourself and cause illness in your own body. If they wire that into your brain, then they can convince you that all it takes is a gene, a
Mhm.
germ, or random luck and chance for it to wipe the whole population out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you there's a lot of money in that outside in, aka no responsibility,
Mhm.
because it's random chance, and then you can victimize people, then you can completely like capture them. And in my world, it just flies in the face of everything that I've been taught, that I've bear witness to, in recognizing that if people actually own it,
Mhm.
actually take the responsibility that Raymond Nichols was talking about, love that dude, um, then they would have a chance. No guarantees, right? Then you have a chance, just like freedom. Freedom is not a guarantee, it's what you then do. You take
Yeah.
the responsibility to do, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
Whew, good stuff. So, talk to me about informed consent because yes, I was scrolling through your Instagram
Mhm.
and you gave a really great little blurb on informed consent. It's a video a few back, but yeah, like you, I believe that informed consent is missing greatly.
Mhm.
In the birth process, in the pregnancy process, in the preconception process, like,
Yeah.
now more than ever, we have fertility obstacles, and then we just shoot those couples over to the ART, the assisted reproductive technology
Mhm.
route, um, postpartum healing, and there's very little true informed consent. And, my world obviously is predominantly the birth world, but
Yeah.
then we talk about pediatrics and everyday people, and yeah, what do you got there?
So by the book, right, informed
Mhm.
consent is benefits, risks, alternatives, and, like, if you did nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And that conversation is actually an obligation. It's an obligation and it's an oath of every healthcare provider that exists, that
Mm,
actually has a license, right? You take a Hippocratic oath and it's first do no harm. But the way you get to that place of do no harm is education, right? Is
mm,
informed consent. We could go back to the Nuremberg Code. We can go back even further where there have been big moments in time where we've seen these atrocities on the human population where we've actually just drawn a line in the sand and said, we can't test on people. We
mhm.
can't unknowingly, like, I mean, you some people knowingly at this stage sign themselves up for certain tests, which is fine because they're
Yeah.
educated through the process. But informed consent is actually an oath by every healthcare provider that exists today. And so people who are jumping on one side of the train versus the other side of the train um, are actually potentially just in violation of their own oath. And in my view, medical
Mhm.
malpractice, gross negligence in some cases. But that doesn't happen, right? These people aren't held accountable because with this
Yeah.
particular thing, in the bigger topic, of around like the shots is there's no liability. If there's no
Mhm.
liability, then there's no accountability. You can't actually sue anybody, right? But
Mhm.
you bring up a really good important point around birth, right? Is I've been saying for a lot of years now that the first way that we are all, you could call it traumatized, or just maybe more simply like dehumanized, is through this process of conventional obstetrics. And granted, it may even happen under the midwifery model of care for some midwives as well, but I would
Mhm.
say largely just the whole, I think it was maybe one of our first couple years in practice, Lindsay, where a doula wrote this blog and I don't remember her name, but she said the title was like, no, you're not allowed to not allow me.
Mm.
Like, you're not
Mhm.
allowed to not allow me. Like, we don't go into any healthcare, like for me, right? Like as a doc, right? I would hope that, and this is for my patients that are listening, I would hope that you understand that I have no attachment to the choice that you make. You could go down everything that I've said in alignment with however our practice philosophy is, and we'd say, high five, we'll love and serve you.
Yeah.
And you could go down the route of everything opposite of what we've
Mhm.
recommended or said or educated upon, and we'd say, high five,
Mm.
we'll love and serve you, right?
Mhm.
These families that we're seeing that have left our practice that are lining up for their kids to get the thing, right?
Mhm.
At 5 years old, as soon as it was authorized. And if they came to me tomorrow saying, can you help? I'd be like, how can I help?
Yeah,
How can I
absolutely.
love and serve you? And I tell my families and I tell my team this. I say, do they need our services more or less?
Mm.
Because we can get really dogmatic, right? We can get really focused on what we believe in and what
Mhm.
our line in the sand is. And then we can, because some of my posts probably trigger a ton of people, but at the end of the day, if they came to me and they asked me for help and they asked for advice, then I would say, how can I serve you?
Mm.
Right. And I believe that's what informed consent is. I believe
Mhm.
informed consent
Totally.
is one, a safeguard for all the potential challenges that we could face whenever we have to trust any industry, any company, any provider, anybody that's going to make a recommendation to us, there's informed consent.
Mhm.
There's something called the precautionary principle, which the chemical industry doesn't, obviously subscribe to either in many respects, which is starting with as little risk or as little as possible versus, throwing the whole book or maybe legislating so that you can do whatever you want to the earth or to humans,
Mhm.
right? And so for me, it's what I fight for because it's my oath, but it's also what my grandfather fought for in World War II, right?
Mhm.
With the Nuremberg Code. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's what most people are fighting for today. Like I look at a
Oh.
lot of the influencers that are out there today. I wouldn't agree with everybody. Like I don't agree with everything Malone talks about or McCullough talks about or anything like that. But are they revealing, are we on the same team? Like are we all moving forward in this
Mhm.
informed consent and health freedom? Yes. Do we have a different version of what health freedom is? Probably.
Mm.
Um, but do we see these guys elevating a conversation that I've and mothers have been like neck deep in the weeds fighting to have normal today, and they are. And so at the end of the day, I think that's the bridge that actually unifies the movement also.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
I love that. Yeah, I think, you said it, we're very similar and believe the same things and that yeah, whatever patients, people, whether it's on a consult or in the office,
mhm,
and they ask me, "Well, what should I do?" I'm like, "Well, what do you wanna do? Have you done your research? Have you looked this up?"
mhm,
And, only when I share my opinion, I'll say, "This is my opinion," and "This is my opinion. This is not what you need to do, but these are my thoughts." And I only share it, basically if people have done their research and it seems like they've put some work into a little bit of education behind it.
right.
Um, but yeah, I
I,
want people oh, go ahead.
I'll be honest with you. I'm being a lot more forward
I was
these
just gonna
days.
yes,
Because I have, right? Like in
for
the past,
sure.
it's like make sure you do your research. Um, and I that was too passive for me like 5 years ago, right?
Yeah,
Because in the birth world, right, we see it. The number one question not
totally.
asked and not asked is about shots for their
Mhm,
babies, right? It's the number
mhm.
one question. And it's like the easy answer is just do your own research, right?
Yeah,
And
look it
then do
up.
your own research. They're going to Google it, and they're going to get put into the fact that Google is actually a vaccine manufacturer, and they have like literal deals
Mhm,
with companies like GlaxoSmithKline for 600 $765 million to push essentially their products, right? We know
mhm.
that they've been found guilty of search engine uh, censorship and things like that.
Directing.
So I don't like that answer anymore. I don't
Yeah,
always say, don't do this or don't do that. I will literally
yeah,
hand people exact resources. And now we have a podcast. So like now we're just
yeah.
like, hey, this episode, and we can actually run them through a curriculum almost so they can get
Yes.
caught up because that moment in time, which I just realized that you have your monitor on. I'm gonna put mine on because I
I
want you to have
totally
good
agree
quality.
with you in that, like, the last 2 to 3 years have
Yeah,
accelerated
yeah.
me in being opinionated and more vocal, and it's what's interesting is when I first designed BirthFit curriculum, and I won't talk about me very much, I'll go
You're
back
fine.
to you,
No,
but,
please do, Lindsay.
whenever I designed the BirthFit curriculum that other leaders and coaches would teach, people got so offended or, they would say, "I can't teach about vaccines." And I said, "Well, as a BirthFit leader or a coach, you need to address this in your birth education courses. It's not a if or will you, it's like that's part of your gig here."
Mhm.
Um, and it's been interesting to see people leave BirthFit for that reason, they don't wanna teach it, that it's too much for them, it's too polarizing, and I think it challenges their own internal belief systems, you
But
know?
why? Why do you think why would they leave from your view if it's too polarizing?
Yeah, I think it's hard, and the
Yeah.
responsibility. aspect comes in there and, maybe they
I think it's bigger than that.
go for it.
I think it's fear of judgment.
Mm,
I think
yeah.
it is because if you don't fall in line lockstep with the narrative, then you will be perceived as something outside of the narrative,
Mm,
which is you are definitely a QAnon Trump supporter, homophobe, transphobe, racist, right? You're
right
definitely a
wing.
white supremacist, right? You're definitely
Yeah.
white right wing. And I think people can't handle that
100%.
perceived condemnation.
Yeah.
And I think to me, I get so angry about that. I get so angry about that because it's about the freaking kids. It's not about
Mhm.
you, right?
Mhm.
It's literally me. And I know all of you who are listening feel the same way, especially if you're still listening to this episode. It's like at the end of the day, you know in your soul, like in your depths of your soul, that that something needs to be said, and then many choose not to, which
Yeah.
is one thing, but the other is leaving an organization or leaving a curricular training because instead of recognizing that this might be the universe or God's way of calling you into a higher expression of yourself where you
Mm,
can actually take arrows, perceived arrows, because they're not real, right? I'm not
totally.
any of those things, per se, of all those different aspects of things that I listed off. But I received a ton of those arrows. And at the end of the day, you can push through that first phase. And then what you realize is the level of authenticity that you didn't know actually existed. Because what I know is that many of the people that did leave believe what you believe, actually
Mhm.
believe in the curriculum and the training,
Yeah.
and they chose not to.
Yeah. So here's a question, and I don't know
Yeah.
if you are at liberty to talk
Mhm.
about military stuff, but, or your opinion there.
What part?
You're like, word vomit, here I go. No, one of my biggest discussions was with somebody that used to be in the military, and, her and I butted heads a lot, and I think she'll appreciate, if she ever listens to this, me asking this question because
Yeah.
I tried to gently say, I feel like the military is, they use the military as guinea pigs for things like anthrax shots, other shots, things like that. And, just my husband, he's a veteran, former Marine, and we just had dinner. This was like 2 weeks ago with still an active duty Marine. He's part-time, but him and his family made a choice, and they made a choice for him to get the vaccine and her not to, basically because of pension, safety, money, and he's already invested,
Yeah.
almost 20 years in the military. Um, and so, yeah, I'm oh, the other thing he told us was, somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 Marines are being discharged, not even honorable. And
Yeah.
we were talking about earlier, these are the people that fight for your rights for freedom. The
Mhm.
fact that you have a choice to choose or not choose what you put in your body. And these people are being let go. And they saw, like you mentioned earlier, they saw some of their buddies get killed in action. It's the journey that they've been through and the choices they've had to make, military specifically over the last 2 years is heartbreaking to me, but I wanna know if you have any thoughts or if you can talk about it.
I can talk about anything I want to. That's the
Okay.
cool thing, Lindsay. The the other thing is, I mean, we could do like a whole episode on this,
I know.
because I think what's happening to the military, what's happening to these guys, firefighters for freedom, law
Well, I was gonna
enforcement,
get into that.
yeah, any uniform service at this point,
Yeah,
is a human tragedy, right? And
yeah.
and and then there's no how do you say this? It's so obvious, right? It's so obvious because you a hospital can fire nurses for not getting the thing, although they already spent 2 years in service to many
Yeah.
COVID wards around it, probably got it and have natural immunity, but they're fired
Yes.
because they're not taking it, right? But then they're rehired, sometimes in the same hospital, as a travel nurse,
Yeah.
paid 2 or 3 times as much, and that contradiction, right? Or if you have your house burning, do you need a vaccine passport before somebody actually saves you from a burning house, right?
Mhm,
Or
mhm.
if the military, right? If there was a World War III tomorrow and we go somewhere, God forbid, and the like before you engage in combat forces and arms and conflict, do you make sure that the other team has all their shots, right? And they got all their
Yeah, do
boosters, right?
y'all across the line have
And
your
if
COVID
they
vax?
don't, do you retreat? Like, do you leave? Like the idea that we're forcing this into a uniform service, one, shows us that there is no emergency. There's no state of emergency.
100%.
Secondarily, it shows us, and this is something that we broke, myself, Alex Zek, and one of the most important people for the military today, Pam Long, who's a mother in Colorado, a West Point grad.
Mm,
We did an episode on the Health Freedom for Humanity podcast and released on my podcast, where we talked about what was happening at West Point,
mm.
right? Our alumni, right? We're all grads from West Point, and we started to see that there was a subset of cadets that were resisting. They wanted to just
Mhm.
wait, or they wanted to educate themselves, or they just didn't want it, right?
Yeah.
And then it started to dwindle, right? The amount of people that were able to resist because the level of coercion launched at them, whether it was their chain of command, whether it was their full on medical officer at the academy, like a full bird colonel, threatening that she would be the one to plunge the needle in their arm,
Oh.
essentially like leveraging schooling, leveraging graduation, leveraging just privileges in being able
Mhm,
to actually be like, what contradiction where they were putting 30 cadets in like a 10-man tent, right?
mhm.
No mask, no distancing, the contradiction of that, right? Because they were resisting a shot, right? And so what we had said as a result of that is we would see that um, virtually 100% compliance that West Point was going for, and in some respects achieving, if the cadets didn't quit or if they didn't somehow find a way through the weeds, that would be launched throughout the entire uniform services, because they can weaponize the chain of command. They can
Mhm.
weaponize whether or not SEALs can continue to deploy. They could
Yeah.
weaponize future schooling. They could weaponize literally threatening their entire career. And so for me, I have a huge issue with this, because it's not just now. It's
Mhm.
the fact that at West Point specifically, but many of these other uniform services who I've gotten to liaise with and talk to, it will be normal for
Yeah.
that generation of leaders who will then be captains, colonels, generals. If they've already submitted to this policy, it will be normal for the rest of time in these
Mhm.
organizations. And so the question that many of the firefighters are saying is like, when do you say no? At what point? Because it was just the 2 shots, right?
Yep.
Or if J&J, you got 1 shot, right?
Mhm.
And then, like, how many boosters is it gonna be? The answer is infinite. The answer
Mhm.
is there is no end in sight until somebody says no.
So we don't comply.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so for
Mhm.
me, that subject is massive, because for me, I'll be honest with you, I believe that I was injured by the anthrax shot. Was it, a complete disability of all of my nervous system? No, but it was 4 chronic illnesses by the time I was 26 and got out of the military that I didn't even know that I had, because they told me I had a clean bill of health, right? Just go out into
Mhm.
the world, be yourself, and do your thing. And I was soul searching myself in San Diego, not realizing that I had freaking 4 chronic illnesses that finally, literally 2 or 3 months ago, the VA acknowledged.
Oh,
I'm 20 years graduated from West Point, and they
oh my
finally
God.
acknowledged something like that, you know? And so
Yeah.
why is it that 20 years has to go by before they acknowledge something that happened to me, meaning how much chronic illness, but
Mhm.
why will they never, ever, ever draw the connection between an experimental program? It's not arguable that anthrax is experimental. It's experimental, and the chronic
100%.
challenges that I have had to deal with for 20 years.
Mm. I have a military vet in my practice right now that was, injured by the anthrax vaccine as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then let's just think about the fallout, right? Let's think about the fallout because that was just for the people that deployed,
yeah.
right? It wasn't every single person got the anthrax shot, right? But now it's the entire it's every human on the
Yeah.
planet. They're going for 100% compliance across the board, and we don't know uh, what the future holds for our healthcare
Mhm.
system, right? But we
Yeah.
can use models, we can use
Mhm.
trends. 80% of the adult population has one comorbidity, 55% has two, 20% has three. How many have four, right? The
Mhm.
risk group for the people who have severe COVID or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And then let's not even, then take the bridge into the kids because we know the trends in the kids,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Oh, okay, so that's
Sorry, that was a lot.
military podcast coming up. No. Um, let's go back to
Sure.
birth and children, and I know one of both like, we both love Michelle Odant, and
Yes.
the author of many books, but, one of the things he talks about is the primal period and the
Mm,
critical period. And we talk about this in BirthFit. And I think it shocks the hell out of people when I start talking about this because people come to BirthFit for fitness and they get so much more. They're like, holy shit. They're like, each training day is programmed with the polyvagal theory in mind. They're like, oh my God, this is way different. But when I start to introduce the critical period and the primal period, and I say, like, this is the most exponential time of growth for a human being, and the most neural connections are happening, growth on top of growth on top of growth, motor, social, cognitive. Why do we not just leave it alone? Like we were talking about earlier in the episode, like let's make normal physiology common again.
mm,
Let's
mm.
make that great again. Like, I don't know if it was ever great, if we truly know what normal physiology is. But when I get people's wheels turning and I ask the question, why do we mess with it? Why do we have a 2/3 induction rate for first time moms? Why do we have a 1 in 3 cesarean rate? Why do we like automatically? And when you mentioned, Western medicine and then even some of the midwifery model, some of midwives today are so on the Western model paradigm that, you go to the birth center and it's, just a nicer hospital room,
Mhm.
basically. Um, but anyways, going back to the critical period, what are your thoughts on the critical period and how important is that?
I think it's one of the most sacred moments
Mm.
in all of life as we know it.
Mhm.
Like whether it's the first 40 days, or
Mhm.
whatever it is, whatever model that you want to look at, every ancestral culture has safeguarded this period like almost exclusively, more so
Yeah,
than any other period of life, right? Most
100%.
people don't know that what I was saying, that 2 half cells to 26 billion cells, right? That babies are born with about happens in 9 months, give or take, right? But that process is 50,000 neural connections per second in utero.
Mm.
And when you understand the neurodevelopment that happens before a baby actually emerges earthside,
Yeah.
right? By 8 weeks, There's a moral reflex, the startle reflex, which is funny and it's entertaining and it causes babies to cry, right?
Mhm.
But the root of the moral reflex is actually homeostasis of the autonomic nervous system.
Mhm.
Like it's a perceived fall, so they think there's something's going to happen. They throw their arms out to brace their fall, but it causes extension, inspiration, increased blood pressure, increase adrenaline, increase cortisol, and then they land, or they that perceived threat is gone and they close in. It causes exhalation. It causes the downregulating of the other hormones. It literally
Mm.
stair steps them as the first primitive reflex that's programmed in utero. 12 weeks is the grasp reflex, right? Plantar and hands. 16 to 20 weeks is the ATNR, where's the beach fencer stance reflex, right? It's also the spinal galant reflex. Most people don't know, and I tend to be the only person in my patient's birth team, essentially, to say
Yeah.
this, that those two reflexes, the ATNR and spinal galant, are highly integrative into baby finding optimal posture in utero.
Mhm.
Oh, by the way, those reflexes are highly involved in baby corkscrewing through the vaginal canal and laterally flexing through the vaginal
Mhm.
canal. It's not that a mom could not push a baby out, it's that there was some sort of disruption in potentially babies'
Mhm.
involvement
Mhm.
and their primal understanding of being an active participant in birth, right? But
Yeah, it
nobody talks
takes
about it
2.
and
They
nobody looks at it,
dance.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for us, this
Mhm.
happens before babies are here, right?
Yeah.
A human being is 100 trillion cells. Babies are born with 26 billion. That process happens in the primal period to literally differentiate and continue the process of developing each cell of
Mhm.
the human experience in that time period. And then what do we have? Baby's born. Who knows how, and who knows what statistic from what hospital and what interventions were forced, right? Force is
Mhm.
lack of informed consent, forced onto a mother. And then it's a 6-week appointment, right? To determine whether or not you can have sex, drive, or go back to work. And
Mhm.
and that's a generally rushed appointment. And you talk to any mother who goes through that conventional model and ask them, like, did your doctor actually seem very conscious or very connected through your process? It's like, no. It's like, what? That's a weird question?
Yeah.
And so for us, that's one side of things. The other side of things is our baby could be born tonight, right?
It's awesome.
And we've had a wild 2 years, right? But we've had a wild, like, last 10 weeks. And it's been so crazy. And what God has essentially been telling me, and the universe has been literally pulling me towards, is how about you focus on your wife?
Mhm.
How about you focus on this new life? And how about you literally prioritize and let go or delegate or just discard all the things that don't matter right now? And I've done that over the last like 2 weeks. And weird, my wife's energy improves. Her sleep is better. She's not feeling that pubic bone, discomfort. My kid isn't as needy.
Mm.
Like the ecosystem of our whole family in this time period, because I let too many lower priority things literally infiltrate into our ecosystem. And I'm not done yet, right?
Mhm.
But just by doing those, an energetic shift happens. Thank God that I heard that call, right? I'm not saying it's all me, right? But I don't think my wife could have done more. She's done everything that she can.
Yeah.
And my kid's a wild beast. Like, she's 2.5. She's a wild, wild animal until she's around other people outside of her family. And she's this mute, right? Just like I was. But what I know is the more that I'm trying to make it more pragmatic and practical for the listeners, right? That the more that I invest myself as the dad and partner and one half, essentially, not one half, maybe like 5% of this journey, the more that every bit of what my wife has put into it matters.
Mhm.
The more, from start to finish, because this is her second time around, actually third pregnancy.
Mhm.
So we could go into that, which is a crazy story in itself. The more we have a chance, right? There's no guarantees. There's no
Mhm.
guarantee that birth is just going to be perfect, right? It's just going to
Yeah.
be this like trot, down the easy lane of birth. Like it's like, no, then we just give ourselves the best opportunity to
Yeah.
allow this process to be as natural, maybe organic, normal, and maybe
Mhm.
even regenerative and transformative as it's supposed to be, right? Michel Adant's such an amazing human being. Like he writes books that, if you're in this field or even open to it, will jar you. Like he's
Yeah.
talking about how our system and how we've completely dehumanized the process of it, that it is epigenetically programming out potentially of the human race vaginal birth.
Mhm.
That is gnarly to think about. And then when you think
Mhm.
about the last 2 years, where you think about the cartels and you think about
Mhm.
all the people pulling the puppet strings, making policy, for your safety,
Yeah.
um, I it's hard for me not to know that they know at this stage,
Yeah.
and that's also why I'm so crazy, right? That's why I fight every day.
Mhm.
So,
It's part of the reason why I came back with the podcast.
yeah, right?
Mhm.
And that's why I invited myself.
I love
Because I was
it.
like, but just think about that for a second, like 50,000 neurons per second in utero, like literally
Mm.
plasticize the human experience, and the human expression is has everything
Mhm.
to do with this period.
It's yeah.
And we need to pour into, invest in, give more consciousness to this period just as much as we would do any other milestone in our life, or maybe just infinitesimally more. Like I could cry
Mhm.
just thinking about this process, because at the end of the
Totally.
day, this is what is at stake, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, okay, I know I hit the hour mark, and I feel like that's a pretty magical place to sort of wrap things up. Oh, but yeah, I wish, we would all, like, just treat this process with a little more sacredness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would
Yeah.
say, just for your listeners, like, and many of whom I know are from this birth world, right?
Mhm.
And many of them maybe for the first time see the two sides of this health freedom thing. And what I would assert to BirthFit in general is that they're indissoluble union. You can't just do one. You can't just
Mhm.
do the other. You have to recognize that that entire cycle and the future of healthcare and the future of humanity is going to be contingent upon the people who not only see it, contemplate it, cognitively understand it, but step into a role of servanthood and leadership today that I think we're all being called to do. And I don't see a more important time than birth, right? I don't see a more
Yeah,
important time.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh. Whew, okay. Well, Stan, I really wanna have you back on in the future after baby comes,
Lindsay, I'm
because
always here.
I got way more questions,
Yeah.
and I wanna be respectful and honor your time and honor your family's time.
Yeah.
Where can people find you and listen to you and follow you? I know you've been deplatformed on Instagram multiple times.
2 times, yes.
Oh my
I don't
god.
know how my 3rd account is revived somehow in the last, like, 2 months, and so I just started to pour into it there.
I
So
saw
Instagram
that.
is one way, Dr. Stanton Hom, type out my full name. There's 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0 because I've had really crappy shadow banning over the years, or over the
Yeah.
years. Yeah, it actually is over the years
2
now.
years.
Secondarily, the Future Generations podcast is our podcast. We cover three very distinct lanes: health freedom in the way that we subscribe to it, natural living, specifically surrounding natural conception, natural, the whole thing that we've essentially talked about, all the way to natural humans, and then self-healing. All
Mm.
the radical ways that we've seen these miraculous self-healing attributes that, and practices that we know are, they're just normal. They're
Mhm,
just things that
mhm,
we know should work every single day if you pour into them, and your health potential is your life potential.
mm.
And that's what we know we subscribe to. I think that's pretty much it. And then obviously our Future Generations Clinic of Chiropractic here in San Diego, for your listeners that are local to this area.
Yeah.
We love everything that we talked about. We would love to have you as a part of our community one way or the other.
Yeah, that if you're in San Diego, get there. So last question, what's been the best birth book you've read and
Hmm.
or the best book you've read over the last 2 years? Either or.
The best book that I've read in the last 2 years, or the best birth book that
Yeah.
I've read. Huh. That's a great question. I would say the best book that I've reread in the last 2 years is actually The Breakthrough Experience by Dr. John Demartini. And I've
Dang.
read it and reread it, and literally my kid is, what, 2 and a half, and this week we started to read the affirmations in bed together every
I'm gonna
morning.
have to get that out.
And for those of you who kind of love, the perspective that we've talked about this time, it is my home base. And get
Mm.
this, Lindsay, I get to interview John on Tuesday.
Holy shit.
Isn't that crazy? And so talk about pipe dreams, right?
Ah,
And so
100%.
if you guys don't know who Dr. John Demartini is, I think you should. This book, in my opinion, is the single greatest foundation to everything that we've been talking about. And when you
Mm,
get that, you understand not only the magnificence of who you are, but the entire universe. And when you understand that, you know what we're fighting for.
yeah. Oh, so good. Thank you so much,
You're
Stan.
welcome, Lindsay.
Oh, you're amazing, and thank you for all you do in this world.
All right, my lady.
All
Should I
right,
just
talk
jump
to you
off?
soon. Yeah.
Yep. Bye.
Bye, Stan. Y'all, thanks so much for listening. Be sure to follow Stan, go visit his website, do all the things. And like I said, he's a very, very good friend of mine, near and dear to my heart. And if you're in San Diego and you are lucky enough to be part of his community, or not yet, but get there, you are one lucky person. The Future Generations practice and community is one that I would want to be a part of in San Diego. So thank y'all so much for listening. As always, this is not medical advice. This is educational and informational for you to do with it as you please. But again, thank you for listening from the bottom of my heart. Love to you all, and I will talk to you soon.